YouTube up.
We're slowly getting them in, Jeff. It seems like we're off to a slow start.
Yeah. Yeah, I never know some days. Now we're up to 18, 24 actually. That's not
Yeah, so
too
it shows
bad.
24 on mine.
Yeah. Anybody that would like to join the panel, raise your Zoom hand and Marty will bring you in. Let's see here. I need to create a shortcut key for spotlighting. Excuse me. All right, we'll get started right away this morning as people keep trickling in. Welcome everybody to the Digital Forum meeting. This is a place where we have a special guest, and today we have Hazel Meredith talking about Nik Filters. And then our second hour will be just general Q&A. So if you have problems or questions about things, that's a good time to bring them up, and we will be glad to answer them for you. We'll get going right away here. Hazel Meredith is an award-winning photographer, educator, speaker, and competition judge who's been teaching since 2007. She conducts seminars, workshops, and webinars across the U.S., both in person and virtually, and has written 2 ebooks and released 2 creative courses on photography. Hazel and her husband Dave produced the virtual Creative Photography Conference, attracting a global audience. She is deeply involved in the photographic community, holding leadership roles and receiving honors including the Ashbrook Award for Digital Imaging Instruction from the Photographic Society of America. Today she's going to talk about Nik Filters and the creative ways that she uses them. So let me turn it over to you, Hazel.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Please spotlight. There we go.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yep, looks good.
Right. I'm going to turn my video off while I'm teaching because I'd rather you watch what I'm doing. It's more important. I do have the chat box open, so feel free to add some questions, or if you can unmute yourself and ask them, that's fine too. Jump in at any time. So today we are going to talk about the Nik collection. They are now on version 7, which came out earlier this year. I've been using Nik since it was made by Nik way back when. With the color effects was the first module that I had purchased. That was back when you had to purchase them individually. And I really love, using them with my work. So we're going to show you, as Jeffrey said, some of the ways that I've used them in some projects. So I'm going to close that up and open up my first image. So this was one I took, it's actually not too far from our house here in Tennessee. And I'm going to open my Nik panel, which I have reduced down here in the lower left corner. And we're going to start with color effects. And I'll talk about some of the new features that they've added in Nik 7 as we go along. So over here, we have all our different filters, and the ones that have the stars are the ones I favorited that I've used most often. And you can just open your favorites if you want, or you can, go to recently used, or just unclick favorites and you'll see all of them again. So for this one, I'm going to choose foliage. And then over on the right-hand side is where we can modify them the way that we want. And I'm going to use method 3. And then we can move the slider to enhance the foliage more or less. And I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. And then it used to be up to version 5. There was a little plus sign on the right-hand panel to add another filter. Now the way that we do that is to come back over to this side, and I want to go to the gradual neutral density. And I don't want to just click it because that would replace what I've just done. If you hover over it, you'll see a plus sign pop up. And then if you click that, you'll see I still have my foliage, and now I have the new filter below that. And as with any kind of plugin and presets and things, you're going to move sliders till it works for your image. I have written down what I've done on this before, so I know kind of where I want to go. So the lower tonality, I want to darken a little bit. And then I'm going to add another filter. I'm going to come back over to the left and add the Polaroid transfer. And you can see this one gave it like a real glow effect. So we're going to adjust this a little bit though. We're going to come in here. I'm going to add a little bit of a border, give it that kind of Polaroid type of an edge. And then texture, we're going to leave there. Outer color, we'll adjust the color of that border a little so you can see it's going from pure white to adding a hint of color in there. And then this smear is kind of this glowish type thing. I'm going to bring that back just a little bit more. And then I adjusted my shadows a little bit here. And now I'm going to just hit the apply to go back to Photoshop. The Nik filters, we don't have to duplicate layers because it does make their own layers. And then if you think the effect is still a little too strong, you can always lower the opacity of that layer a little bit. So we could pull it back just a little bit more. And that's our first image. So we went from, you know, it was an okay image, but wanted to make it a little more dramatic, add some more color. And again, you can always adjust everything until it's to your own liking on your image. Do we have any questions on that one? Okay.
Everybody looks quiet so far.
That's okay. I know sometimes we get lots of questions and sometimes less, but that's okay either way. But I want to give people an opportunity. So this next one, I'm actually going to show you 2 ways that I've processed it. So this was, again, another shot down here in Tennessee. This one I did add this, whoops, don't want to do that, putting a brush on it. I did add the antiques and things. It was kind of blank up here. And I did change the sky because it was kind of a gray day. So I used one of my own skies and did that in Photoshop. So the first one we're going to go into silver effects, which I love for all my black and white work. But you can also do more than just straight black and white. So we're going to come over here to the presets, and I'm going to go to number 34. Somewhere in the middle here. You have to hit all of them, I guess. Come back down here. There we go. And this one's called yellowed number 2. So it's giving it that little bit of sepia look. And then we're going to make some changes to this. So over here on this side, we're going to come down to the, under the, where is it? Under the borders. I want to change that a little bit. So we're going to use the same border, but I'm going to change the size of it so it's not quite so large. So I'm going to bring this back to a negative. And the spread, we're going to bring to 19 and leave the roughness. And then we're going to do some adjustments up here. So we've got different film types if you want to change that. I'm going to use the one that's there, but you can go in and change different film types as well. There's always lots of things that you can do in these different adjustments. So we've got clear view, our color filter, we've got details. You can add more grain if you wish. And then you have sensitivity to the colors. You could do levels. So we're going to go with that for now. And I'm wondering why my border size didn't really change. No, because it didn't move the slider. There we go. We want to come down here. I just want a little bit of a border. And we're going to go to about there. And we'll say apply. And then once I get back here, I'm going to add a hue and saturation adjustment. And I want to take away a little bit more of that color. And go here. And I'm just going to bring the saturation down just a little bit. And that's our first version of this image. So if you want to go for like a straight black and white, you can definitely do that here. So I'm going to turn these two off so you can do a before and after. Go back to my background. This time we're going to use analog effects. And I really didn't used to use this one a whole lot, but within the last few years, I found I like it more, and there's some really cool creative looks in here. So we're going to go to, we're on all Nik, and I'm going to choose black and white number 3. And it's got that very faded, like old film kind of look to it. So up here we can choose the different film type, and I'm going to go with warm and select this one. And that actually brings back a little bit of the color, which I liked. And then under our, I'm going to use levels, so let's collapse that. Under the dirt and scratches section, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to change this to scratches. And I'm going to move the strength to a +100 so I can see the effect that I choose. And then I'm going to choose second row left. And then I can bring back the opacity a little bit, but I needed to have it at 100 so I could see the effect, because minus 100, we wouldn't see anything. So I'm going to go about there. And if we wanted to lower the effect on the sky and add a little more color back, one of the things they introduced in version 6 of the Nik collection is a control line. So we've always had control points where you can make an adjustment to one area, which we'll be doing in the next project. But they've added this control line. So above the line will be 100% of the effect, and I'm going to drag this down to about here. And you can see I have this line here. So anything I do in the adjustments above this line is going to be 100%, and then it's going to fade out down here. And you can continue to tweak these once you start making adjustments. So next to these, where it says control line 1, if I select the mask here, it's going to show you exactly where my adjustments is going to go. And I'm going to work with the luminance and chrominance to adjust the brightness and coloring of these. So you can see exactly where I'm targeting. And then when I turn the mask off, you can see before and after. So it's a real minor change, but it darkened this top part just a little bit. And you can, again, you can retweak this so that it only affects exactly where you want it to be. And then we're going to apply that one.
Yeah, they do seem to have really added a lot to that analog.
They really have.
plug-in.
And that's why I really kind of started playing with it when I was creating a class a couple of years ago, maybe about 3 years ago. And then with these last few versions, they keep adding more, with the functionality.
Yeah.
So we have that version, and I'm going to turn these on so you can see that's the true sepia, and then we have this kind of faded look. So there's lots of things you can create, and sometimes it's fun to kind of do one thing and see what else you can do with an image if you're not sure kind of the direction you want to go with it. All right, I'm gonna close that one down. So next we're gonna work on a flower, something different. So again, I'm gonna start with the analog effects on this one. And this was one I really wasn't quite sure where I was going with it when I started. It's like, I know I wanted to do something for the background to kind of, you know, darken some of these bright areas, maybe add a little more bokeh to it. And then, I don't know, just kind of tweak the flower. So this was what I ended up with. So in this one, we're going to go into the camera kit. So we have all of the different presets under camera. We close that down. You're going to see camera kit. And when I open that, that gives you the individual kind of adjustments you can do. So within the camera effects, it kind of combines a bunch of these, but you can also choose them individually. So I'm going to just go to film type. And I want to cool this one down. And we're going to use this one. And then I brought my strength back just a touch. So one of the new features in this latest version is I want to switch to a different modules. I want to use color effects next. So I could apply this and then manually open color effects. But what they've added now is up in the upper right, this switch to. So when I click that, I'm going to choose, I want to go to color effects. And it's basically going to do the apply the first one and then reopen the next effect you want all by itself. Yeah, it's kind of cool. It saves a few, you know, seconds of time. And it just does it for you. So I'm going to go back to
I had heard about it, but I hadn't seen it done yet.
Yeah, I'm going to do it with a few of the filters on this one. So I'm going to add some Glamour Glow. And I brought this one all the way up to 100%. So by doing that, it darkened down my background, which I was looking for. But now I want to keep a little more of the brightness on the flower. So I'm going to add a control point, which is right over here. But the other new thing that they've done, click, there's my control point, is you can now, instead of only having the option of a round circle, you can make an oval. So if you put your cursor over one of these dots on the circle till you get the hand tool, you can stretch it. And then you can rotate it. And you can move it. So I want to make sure for this one, I keep the point on the white area. Otherwise, it's going to make a different adjustment. And I'll show you that when I apply the mask. You're going to see how that works. So if we turn on, again, you have that masking option. If I were to move this point to the dark area, I'm going to get a very different result because now it's targeting the dark areas and not the white areas that I wanted. So this helps you, you know, place that where you want as well. And then I'm also going to do a little bit to the luminance and chrominance here. I bring this down some. So I'm brightening the areas and the chrominance as well. We don't want it that bright. Where'd it go? We're going to leave that about there, I think. Okay, so if we turn our mask off, we can see that was before it and now after it. So we've added some of that brightness back to the white flowers. And again, I want to switch now to analog effects. I'm going back to the analog effects. And for this one, I'm going to go back to my cameras and I'm going to use vintage camera 4. It takes a second to catch up. And we're going to go to our cool tones again. I'm going to use the second row and bring the strength up on that one. And that's it for what I want to do here in Nik. And what you can also do now with your Nik product is down here, you have the option to convert to a smart object at any point in your editing. So if I click on that, what's that tell me is I can no longer use the brush because now it's a smart object, so I don't really need that. So I'm just going to say okay. And now when I apply this, it's going to apply a smart filter. So I could have done that on the first one and then they would have all been grouped under that. But I do have like a smart filter on this part of the analog effects, which is great because you used to not be able to go back in and change something you did in Nik. But now if you make it a smart filter, then that would give me the option of opening it back up and, tweaking that adjustment.
Yeah,
which is great.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, that just is new as well, which is really good. So now to get a little more bokeh in the background, I'm going to add one of my textures. And this was actually water drops from a sprinkler that I converted to a black and white. And I did end up, when I was doing this before, stretching it a little bit to make the dots up here a little bit bigger. And the way we work with textures is by changing blending modes. And this one I went with soft light. I'm going to bring my opacity back. And then I'm going to add a layer mask because I don't want the bokeh on the flower itself, just on the background. So we're going to layer mask. I have a brush on black. And we're going to mask these. I don't want it on the leaves or the flower. And you can see where I've missed over on the mask, and you can just fill that in. And then if you wanted to bring a little bit of your texture back to your subject, I masked it at 100%, so it took all of it off. But if you double click in your layer mask, it will open up a properties panel, and you can lower the density of the mask, which is like the opacity of the mask. So if I wanted to bring some of that back a little, just a little bit, I can adjust that with the density. That's another hint because you can see how it's gotten a little gray now because it's not at 100%. And then I decided to lower this opacity a little bit more. Come down here. I don't want these to be too bright, just something a little subtle in the background. Anybody have any questions? Quiet group today.
Yeah, it's a quiet group. I don't know.
They're all just fascinated with learning.
Yeah. Well, I am because you're pointing out so many new things that I hadn't caught on the new version. So I didn't know you could adjust those points now to ovals instead of that darn circle.
I know, because the circle doesn't always work, and then you're copying it a bunch of times to cover an area where now you can basically create the size, and shape that you need and not have to make a bunch of copies of it.
Yeah.
So for this one, I'm going to do an HDR blend. So in my panel, I can just click on my HDR. Now you'll notice there are two. One is if you have a single image that you want to do the tone mapping to, or in this case, we're merging multiple exposures. So I'm going to click on that. We don't need to know what's new in Photoshop right now. I have to do that later because I have this open. And then we're going to click on add our files. So I'm actually right here. So I'm going to just change this so I can see them. And we're going to use these three. And these are raw files. So it takes a slightly longer to process when they're raw when we do the merge. So I can make sure we've got the right ones. You can also merge this as a smart object. I found I have in the HDR one, I've had issues with this working properly. So I haven't done, there's actually an update for the Nik 7 collection. When I first opened it this morning, I was checking something and it popped up. So it's like, no, I'll do that later. I don't want to do it right before I'm teaching.
Yeah, no.
'Cause inevitably it will mess something up. So I'm
Yep.
just going to merge these and not do a smart object.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You're working in Photoshop. Does this all work the same coming out of Lightroom?
Yes, you can also use the plugins in Lightroom. So it would be pretty much the same way. I don't
'Cause
usually use them
it
there,
looks,
but
it looks different where you're doing in Photoshop than the last time I used it in Lightroom. The menus didn't seem to be the same. So, as
do you have the latest version? Because they may have
far as I know,
changed. Okay. Yeah, it could just be, the difference in the two programs. I haven't really used it in Lightroom. I usually do on my plugins from Photoshop. So there very well could be a little bit of a, just a look, the layout a little bit different.
now when you set up your files that you just merged together,
Uh-huh.
do you have them set in a separate folder already or
I did
pre-read?
because I have everything all set for what I'm doing
Okay.
today.
Okay.
Normally you would go to whatever folder, you had imported your images to and select from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
the idea is
Lightroom, you
if
could
I'm
do
working
that.
from Lightroom, if I want to go to Photoshop, then I just take a photo and put it over there. But you're saying we have to put it into some kind of other.
No, not necessarily. Like I said, I have them ready to go because I know I'm working in Photoshop today, and it's just easier. I have them all lined up and numbered so that it's easy to find what I'm doing when I'm presenting like this.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
You have to bring them all in together though, or can you go bring one in and then go to a different folder, bring a second one and so on?
No, I think you would have to bring them all in at once.
Okay, so what
And
Steve said was that, yeah, you probably have to put them in a separate folder together then.
well,
to
if you're, when you're doing an HR, normally you've shot them in that order, so they should all be in the same folder. You wouldn't really be selecting from different locations to merge for HDR. You know what I mean? Like wherever you brought,
I
like
understand what
the
you're saying, right,
the
yeah.
place that I shot this was in New York at the old Catskill Game Farm. And so everything I shot that day is in one folder, and these are sequential shots because I bracketed for HDR.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right. So now that we have them in here, excuse me if I'm sniffling a little. I've got a little bit of a cold. Try not to. So we're in our merge dialog box. So now we want to, I always leave the alignment correction on. So if anything did shift a little, it will line it up for you. I don't have anything moving in this image, so I don't need to do the ghost reduction. So I'm going to skip that step. Under chromatic aberration, sometimes you'll get where the really bright area and a really dark area, you may get a little color fringing, and this is where you can correct this. And now, it looks like right now, like, well, how am I going to see that? I'm pretty sure there's going to be a line up here on this really bright area. And once I start moving one of these sliders, it's going to actually brighten it up, and you can see it in this box over here. And I can take this pin and go, I want to pin this area, and it's going to show me it over here in this box without moving. So I can see there's a little greenish fringing there. So I'm going to move this slider to try and get rid of that as best I can. And this is the red cyan slider. And then we're going to move the blue and yellow slider. And I'm going to go to about there. And again, you're going to kind of adjust these so you get that as clean as you can. Right. And then once we have that done, we're going to create our HDR. And it will take it right into Photoshop because I opened the panel from Photoshop. So this is now our merged image, and there's presets you can work with, like with any HDR program. I actually do a lot of HDR with Photomatix because I've had that for eons and I use it a lot. But since I'm doing Nik today, I'm going to show you the Nik version, and they both work pretty much equally well. The one thing I like about Photomatix is when you're doing the if there's ghosting, you can manually select the areas for it to check where in Nik you have to choose one image that has the proper, areas that you want unblurred or whatever, if something like we're walking through your image. So that's the only function I find a little bit better in that one. But this one does a really good job as well. And obviously, if you have the Nik collection, you're going to want to use this one. So I'm going to start over here on the presets, and I used this one here because I really wanted to bring out the texture of that peeling paint and the kind of the drama of this old building. And then we're going to come over here to the right-hand side, and we're going to bring the shadows down a little bit and bring the highlights down a little bit more. So we get that detail back in that stairwell up here. I'm going to add a little bit of saturation and the exposure. I came back. I'm going to bring that down just a hair. And then you can, again, either go back to Photoshop and come back in, or you can switch. And we're going to go to Nik Viveza, which is your really great processing for your colors of your image. And this also has some presets you can start with. And some people say they don't really like using presets on the different software. I always say that the companies took all the time and money and to create these. I look at them as a good starting point, and then I can fine tune it to my own taste. So I'm going to use this cool one, and then we can make further changes over here. I'm going to add a little bit of structure to this to crisp it up a little bit. And I'm going to leave that there because it was green wall, so I want to leave it that color. And then you can, if you want to make any other adjustments, I think I kind of like that the way it is. So we're going to apply that. The one thing that they no longer have in the Nik version 7 as compared to 6 is the perspective effects, which I really liked, and I liked it even better than the skewing in Photoshop. So I still have my version 6 installed if I want to go back to that. For this one, to save some time, we are going to just use the Photoshop and go to Edit, Transform, and Skew. Even though there's a perspective one, I like using Skew better because I can make each side different. I don't have to have it be an equal correction on each side. And I would just straighten these areas a little bit here. So I'm going to pull this out and then pull this side out. And I want to make sure my pole here stays straight as well. And then I'm going to crop just a little bit. Click that. And I'm going to bring this in just to the edge of that window. And I might even bring this in past that, but I know it's straighter now. Oops, get back up there. And pull this down about there. And then, as I like to do, anybody who's seen me teach before knows I like my textures. I'm going to add one here to add a little bit more grunge to this. I know Jeffrey knows I love my textures. And this is one of my, all the ones I'm using are my own that I have in my online store. And this is one of my borders. Now, when you have a texture that has a lot of white areas like this one, I also have these as their brushes and textures. You can get both together. But when we have a light area, I want to use the blending mode of multiply, and it's going to get rid of those brighter areas and just pick up the darker tones. And then we can bring back that opacity to tweak it the way you want. A little bit more. So before it And then after, it gives that little bit extra grunge factor in there. And that's, you know, when it's something that's kind of got all this old peeling paint and all, for me, it accents the image nicely.
Yeah.
And there you have it. So that came a long way from our original shots. I'll bring over, I'm working from my other screen, but I'm going to drag it over so you can see what the actual, whoops, 3 images looked like, if it lets me. There we go. So these 3 were the original shots. And that's what we merged into the HDR. So, and I believe, I don't know if I brought my tripod that day. I can't remember. I may have. I think I did. I think I was on a tripod. I usually try and use a tripod for HDR, but there are times if I don't have it with me, because I'm not a tripod lover, that I have done HDR bracketing. I do it manually on my camera, and we'll just bracket the 3 shots or whatever. I'll usually find somewhere I can kind of line up that center point of my camera and use that as my spot to kind of keep it as straight, as much aligned as possible. But that's why I always like having that alignment button checked on the HDR, because it will do that for you if needed. So, any other questions?
No, they're still very quiet.
Yeah, quiet group. Oh, then we got one in the box. Signe says, love all of this. I've never gotten into the really creative aspects, but I'm psyched now. Awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. No, so, when I'm doing projects like this, it's not so much, I mean, yes, I'm showing you the results that I got from a project, but it's more about inspiring you to kind of jump into these products and try it and just see what happens on your own images. Because of course it's going to be different, depending what you have and what you want to do. Okay, so this one, just a regular ordinary shot of a flower, and it was, soft in the background, which is okay. And I decided I wanted to kind of just give it a little bit of a very dreamy look, was what I was going for here. So we're going to go into our Nik, we're going to go into color effects. And I feel a sneeze coming on. Oh boy, let's hope, I hope not. And so we're going to start with the classical soft focus. And then over here under method, there's always, with certain filters, you'll get drop downs with different effects. So you can see how much you can do with it. And this one, I'm going to use soft focus 3, which is the softest. And I'm going to move the strength of that to 100%. And my highlights, I brought over about there. And then we're going to add Glamour Glow, which is one of my favorites. I never used to really use this. I don't know, a couple of years ago, I really got into it, and I like the way it looks on certain images. So we're going to add a little bit of glow. And we're going to bring our shadows about there where they are. Highlights, we're going to move a little bit. And then I wanted to go even just a little softer. So we're going to add another filter. And it's one you wouldn't think of using in this way, but we're going to use the fog filter. So it's not a landscape that we're going to add the fog to, but to our flower. So we're going to go here. I'm going to bring the intensity down. We don't want it quite that washed out. And my highlights, I brought over to 100. And then the opacity, I brought back just a little bit. And then we're going to switch to analog effects. And we're going to use autochrome 2. And that's not the coloring I want, so we're going to do some changes here. So we're going to first go up into the light leaks here, and I'm going to use number 18. If you hover over it, you'll see what the numbers are. 15, 17, we're 18. And then I changed the frame a little bit. So we're going to come down here. I'm going to use this one. And likely to, okay. So this particular effect that I use had this little bit of writing here, and I'm going to get rid of that when we get back to Photoshop. So I'm going to say apply. Let me just use the healing brush. I like the filter, but I didn't really like that on there. So I'm just going to grab my healing brush.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, especially with the flower. I guess with certain things, maybe it's, like that edge of the film kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for this one, I didn't really like it. So we're going to get rid of it. I don't care with the edge. That's okay. Because it kind of balances the jagged edge over here. And if you didn't like this white part, you could get rid of that too. So everything's always adjustable. And there you have it. So from our original, which was, an okay shot. I like that a lot better. It's just moody, dramatic. Alrighty.
Hence, when you change from the different applications in Nik 7, it's going to create a layer for each one, right?
Yes. What it does is it comes back here. It's like as if you hit the apply and then you went to the next effect. It's just doing that for you when you hit that switch. You'll see it actually do those steps for you. So it's, just saves a couple seconds of time, I guess.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and probably should say that it's taking the previous effect and adding it all together for the next one that you do, right?
Yeah. Excuse me. It applies the first filter that you've used, whichever module you were in, like color, if it's analog effects, and then you go to color effects, then analog effects is going to be on its own layer, and the color effects will be on a separate layer. Like I said, if you do make it a smart object, then it will stack them in a smart layer.
Okay.
So you can go back if you want to have the option of being able to change them. So you can also do that. So this one, this was from my garden when we were in Connecticut. End of the season, the little tufted titmouse landed on a pole in my garden. And this is just the sidewalk of my neighbor behind us and the grass. So we want to, jazz this up a little bit. So we're going to go into Viveza. Start here. So we're going to come over to our selective tones. I brought my highlights down because I'm looking actually now at my background is what I'm adjusting, and then I'm going to show you how we get it off of our bird. So I'm bringing down the highlights, the midtones, and I open up the shadows just a hair. And I'm going to add a control point on this post. So we're going to go over here to our control point, and I'm going to add it about there. And then I'm going to bring that in because I really want to kind of focus just on this darker area. And again, even though we don't have this part selected in the circle, it's going to look for tones that are, contiguous, and it's going to make that adjustment over that whole area. And I just want to open up the shadows on this one like that. Not too bad, right? But I want to be able to see a little more detail in there. So I'm going to apply this. And I want to mask the adjustment. Actually, I was adjusting the bird in this case, and then we'll do the background. So I want to mask it off the background. I just want all the changes we just did. We, evened out the lighting on the bird a little bit more. So I'm going to, on this layer, go to my quick selection tool and select subject. And it does a pretty good job getting most of it. And I'm just going to add to my selection and grab the rest of this post. And we can adjust the tail once we get the mask made. No, we don't need you right now. We're not doing generative fill. And so if I make my selection and then I hit the layer mask, it's now masked that off the background. So you can see our changes are only affecting the bird and the post. And again, we can fix this little part over here. Zoom in, grab our brush. Obviously make it much, much smaller. And we can complete masking in there. And I'm just doing this real quick, but you can, fine tune that. So we get all of that background selected. And next we're going to do Nik 7 define, which is noise reduction. So I'm going to click on, you can do it automatically or manually. Usually I do manually because we're going to adjust it down here. And I'm going to do the contrast noise. We're going to up that, and the color noise. And then you can do a split screen up here on the top. So you can see and you can zoom in. So you can see there's your before and your after. So you can really see the difference in the background is where we're really going to notice that. And it's getting rid of a lot of that background noise. And then again, if we hit apply, we can choose the next one, or we can just go to switch to and go to sharpener output, because I've already done adjustments on it. So we want to use the output version. And I'm going to go down here to the output sharpening section, and I'm going to do a strength about, not there, about 75, and just a teensy bit of structure, not much, and focus. And then we'll say apply. And now I want that effect, the sharpening I only want to apply to the bird. The denoise can be on all of it. So I'm going to use this mask to mask my bird, and then we're going to invert it. So if you click on the mask and hold the Alt on a PC or Option key on a Mac, keep holding that and drag your mask, you can copy it. And then I'm going to do a Control I or Command I. Oops, wrong one. I want to invert that one with a Control I. So oops, did I do the wrong way? I did. Let's undo that. We didn't have to invert that one. Control I, because I want the sharpening on the bird, not on the background. All right, and then if that's a little too over sharpened, again, we can always bring back our opacity. So I like to, do things a little more sometimes than you need, and then be able to tweak it with the layer adjustment. And we're going to do one more thing here. So we're going to go into our Nik color effects. And we're going to use the graduated neutral density filter. So I'm going to take off the control and just go back to the single. And let's fit to screen. So we're going to go graduated neutral density. And the upper tonality, I brought there, and the lower tonality, we're going to bring down. So this is where I'm going to darken my background a little bit. And then you can control how much it blends with this slider. And then the vertical shift will control where the blending is, kind of the line between the upper and lower. And for this one, I'm just going to move it just a hair. And then we go shadows up there and highlights there. And again, in this case, I'm looking at the background and we're going to mask it off of our bird. So I'm going to say, okay. And this is where I want to invert the mask. So I'm going to use this mask, hold my Alt key, move it up. And now I want to do the Control or Command I. So we're masking that filter from the background, from the bird, and we just have it on the background because I wanted to tone down that bright green there. And then I decided to add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer to the whole thing. And I brought my brightness up just a hair and contrast just a little bit more. So it could be just minor tweaks sometimes that you need. You can see it before and after. There you have it. So we went from, let's see, the original was here. We had lots of deep shadows and we evened out the lighting on our bird and got rid of the noise and sharpened everything a little bit. All right, any questions?
I have a question for the contest experts. When doing all this, is that allowed for the various contests that we have?
Yeah, none of the stuff she's done so far would not be allowed. So yeah, you could do all this in our contests.
The only thing you might not be able to use it like the ones I use textures on. Using the textures, they would most likely need to be your own. And that's what most clubs require.
Yeah, that would be the only
Yeah, but you can use all
difference.
of these filters and things because you're just
Yeah.
correcting your image. Using the Nik, I mean, you could do all this in Photoshop, but the Nik is giving you a much easier way and I think much more efficient and more options than it would take a lot longer to create an effect like that if you did it in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Or Lightroom. Okay.
Yeah, it's basically adjusting contrasts and tones and such. So that's all allowed, just not the texture.
Yeah. Alrighty. A couple more for you. So this one I pre-straightened this church. And I did do it in perspective effects, but just to speed things up, I had did that ahead of time. And this one we're going to use the Nik Define again. This was actually a cell phone image. And we're going to do the measure auto on this one. And I just added some contrast and color. About there. And again, you could do the split screen. I'll try and zoom in. And you can see how much more noise is over here than over here. So that did a pretty good job there. And now we're going to switch to silver effects. And you can see where it's added the layer for the first one, and now we've opened the second one. We're going to fit screen, get rid of the split. And I'm going to use under the modern category 4.3, which is more silvery color. And then under our global adjustments, let's scroll all the way up here. Let's see where we're at. Global, I want to do highlights. I'm going to brighten up a little bit, add a little bit more contrast. And then under our finishing adjustments, down here, we can do the toning right now is a true black and white, but you can also add a hint of color. So I'm adding this kind of little bit of a bluish tone. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a border. Number 9, and I'm going to make that much smaller. And also reduce the spread of it. And we'll apply that. And if you wanted to bring back a little bit more color, we could lower the opacity of that layer. Sometimes I like to do this with the black and white. And if you come back about here, you just start picking up a hint of color in the sky and the flag because the church is white anyway. So that's not really going to change. It just gives it that little bit of colorization, which I liked. Okay. And so this was another one I really wanted to, darken down this background. This heart-shaped leaf was there naturally. I did not add that. That was just another leaf in the background. And I thought that was pretty cool. This one I did my basic corrections in Lightroom, and I used Topaz Studio 2 a lot, and I just added this little bit of texture to it. So in here, I'm going to go into Viveza. And we're going to add a little bit of, where's my saturation? A little bit of structure. There we go, saturation. Sometimes you forget where all these sliders are. You gotta look around a little bit.
They got an awful lot of them. Boy.
They do. I mean, you could really adjust anything and everything. So these are your global adjustments, and then you have selective tones here as well. So you can adjust your highlights. And then the midtones I brought down. And my shadows I made darker because I want to bring that background down. And the blacks I also made darker. So you can play with this as much as you want to get, the right combination in there. And now I'm going to switch to color effects. And if I'll show you what it does if you do the smart object now, and then we switch to our color effects, just so you can see how it'll look in the layers panel when we're done. So this is, again, just saying that it realizes it's a smart object, so it will act as a smart filter, and the brush is deactivated once you do that. Which I never really use the brush anyway, to brush things in.
Yeah, no, me neither.
So we're going to go to color effects. Actually has some presets as well, which I typically use the different filters, but under the presets category, they do actually have a bunch of presets. And I started playing with these, and I kind of forget they're there sometimes because it always opens up to the menu of the filters.
Right. Yeah, I never realized they had presets.
Yeah. And I use this wildlife. You don't always have to use what they're designed for, but this soft and dreamy. So it's kind of adding that little bit of glow. You can see over here is that preset is done glamour glow, soft focus, and pro contrast. And if you wanted to tweak anything, you can, but I kind of like the way that looked, the way it was. And then once I finish this one, I'm going to show you the finished one to make it quicker. But first, here's the smart filters. So we've added both of these. So now we could go back into either one of these and make changes if we wanted to. So it's going to open it back, and this is what I've done before. So if I needed to, maybe brighten up the highlights a little bit more and apply, because it's a smart filter, we can do that, where you couldn't do that before with any of the Nik products. So that's if you do it with the first one, then they're all going to stack within that one smart filter. And I'm going to open up my finished image. And I decided this, because I had this big dark space, that it needed a quote over here. And I added this in Photoshop with type. And you can see the different layers. And then I did, I'll zoom in so you can see the details of these. If I open up my effects panel, you can see I did a bevel and emboss, which gives the type a little bit of a curve, little drama there. And I always like, usually if it wasn't a dark background, I would use a drop shadow, but I didn't need it because it's dark already. But I did add a stroke of a lighter green, and I really should tweak the spacing there on those, because those shouldn't be overlapping that way. They should be, you know, smooth there. But yeah, I like playing with type sometimes too. So that's a nice way to add something, you know, if you wanted to make it a wall hanging or a card, kind of a thing, you can do that as well. All right, any questions there?
No, that works neat. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved the way it kind of gave that little bit of glow, and just it gave it some more drama over. Let's go back to our original. Oh, even just checking here, there was from the original image to something with some more drama.
Yeah.
Just makes it more interesting. We got two last projects here for you. So I like to take images. I call it a ho-hum image. It's kind of my ebooks are take ho-hum to a work of art, work it with textures and overlays. And just take something that's kind of like a ordinary image, and like, okay, so what else can I do with this and make it more creative? So first, this one is a pretty noisy image. So we're going to start with define. And we're going to come over here and make our contrast noise about there and color noise about there. And again, we can switch to our other functions, and to check it again, you can, you know, use the slider, and you can see a huge difference in the before and the after. It's nice and smooth as opposed to lots of noise in there. So we're going to switch to Viveza, because I wanted to, even though I may get creative with an image, I always like to get the original image looking as good as I can. So in this case, I wanted to pump up the blue a little bit. And they happen to have a preset that worked perfectly called Blue Hour. And it just gave it a whole lot more color. And I like that one just the way it was. And then we're going to go into our color effects. And this is another one that I never really used to use, but it does have some good ways to do it. We don't want presets. We want to go back to our filters. And I'm going to go into the bicolored filters. And this one's got a ton of different presets in here, colors that you can use. And it's kind of like a graduated color. You can use a single color, or they graduate from one color to another. And I use this violet pink set. That was number 2. And again, you can adjust everything to taste and change the blend. So you can see how that's moving as I change the blend line there. And then the shift is going to control, you know, where on the page it is. So I went with about there. And then you also can angle it, because right now it's straight across the blend. You can rotate it to angle your gradation a little. So now it's kind of going from the upper left to lower right. And then the shadows, I adjusted a little bit. And then we're going to add some Glamour Glow. And I wanted just a little bit on this one. So I just about here. Just gives it that nice little glow on the edge. Because this image was okay, but it wasn't like super duper sharp. So this was a way you can kind of, work around that. And then I did go back up to the bicolor filter and change the vertical shift just a tad more. Out there, so it was a little bit higher on the page. And then we're going to do one more thing. We're going to go into our analog effects. This is the first time I had tried this project. I ended up adding a texture to it. I'm like, well, for a Nik demo, what can I do that I can maybe create something within the product rather than a texture? So I came back in here and I went into the camera kit because I just want to use one function. I went to the dirt and scratches. And then from here, I went into eroded and applied this one. And then brought back the strength a little. So it kind of gave a little texture to the sky, gave it a little more drama. And we'll apply that one. Instead of just a plain color background, it gave, a little more interest to the sky. So we went from this very ordinary, kind of throwaway image to something a little more dramatic. Okay, one more. This last one, we're going to take this old house and we're going to do a couple of things here. So the first thing this one needs is a new sky because it was just a very gray day. This is also a cell phone image. It's actually Dave's image that I stole. I wasn't with him the day that he first saw this place, and he just took some pictures from the road. And yeah, he had talked to the lady who lived there, and usually, with the barns that we photograph down here, we see somebody outside say, "Hey, is it okay? Can we come on the property?" And this was one of the few people who was kind of like, well, I don't know if I want you to take pictures, kind of thing. Well, what do you do with the pictures? So he tried to explain it, but she was like, well, maybe ask me again in the future. And we haven't stopped back over there. But we have a comment in the chat. Eric said, totally new to Nik 7 and in essence to modern computer-based processing. Are the Nik filters separate and need to be purchased or leased in addition to a Photoshop or Lightroom? Are there different sets and price points? Are future upgrades separate for the filter function? And he likes the program, and he thanks Waco for having a Zoom option to attend. So that's a great question. They are separate from this is not part of Photoshop. The Nik collection is now, when Nik decided to not produce it anymore, Google bought it and just kind of let it languish. And then DxO, who makes other plugin software, purchased it 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. And they've really revamped the whole thing, and I love the way they've improved it. So it used to be when I first started, you did have to buy each one of these modules individually. Now it's one program, and I think I want to say it's around $149. But if you sign up for my blog, which I'll show you on the last filter when we're done, last screen. When they have sales, I am an affiliate, so I will post that in my blog. And I'm sure they'll have something coming up for Black Friday. I haven't gotten anything from them yet, but odds are they will. And it's you purchase it outright. They do not have subscriptions. They do upgrade it yearly. So if you want to go from one version to the next, there's always a discounted price if you already own like the previous 2 versions. So you don't have to do it every year. And if I weren't teaching it, I wouldn't do it every year. They supply me the software since I am now, an affiliate. But I did purchase it for years before that. And so you can skip, you know, one or two, as long as you don't skip more than two, because then you would have to repurchase it at an original price. So if you do it, you know, like every third year, if you don't want to buy it every year, you could do that at the upgrade price. This version 7 did have a lot of really good upgrades, so I definitely would have purchased this one, you know, if I were still having to purchase them every year. But like, you know, maybe next year they won't do as many major upgrades, so you know, you could definitely skip one if you wanted to. So that's answers that question. So for this one, I'm gonna actually start here in Photoshop and go to Edit, Sky Replacement. And when you come in here, they do have some skies that come with Photoshop's, you know, part of this program. I have from a friend of mine, Gavin, that I've done some webinars and stuff with him, but I also have all of my own in here that I have it from my store. And I'm going to go under Stormy Skies 2, and I'm going to use number 10, which is actually the one that happens to be up there. I must have used it on another project. So what you can do once you have your sky selected is you can make some adjustments, of course. So under here, I brightened it just a tad, even though it is a dark, I was kind of going for a dark, gloomy kind of thing. I just brightened that a little bit. And then you can also adjust your foreground lighting and things so you can make them match. And it will do some of that, you know, depending on the sky you choose, it will try to do that for you. But sometimes I also will adjust that more myself. So I brought down the brightness of the foreground here. And I can close, say, okay. And I always have my skies output to new layers so that it will give me the ability to adjust things and move things, you know, with the masks. And it puts it in this little folder. So if you collapse that, everything is under that one group. Okay, so now we're going to go into Silver Effects. And under Modern, I'm going to use number 42. And that one's called Intensifier. So it just kind of emphasized the lights and the darks, give it a little more contrast. I'm going to add, oops, a little bit of structure, crisp things up a little bit. And then under our finishing adjustments in the toning, I'm going to give it just a little bit of a sepia kind of a look, just a hint. I don't want to go too dark, so we're going to use this one here. And then I'm going to switch to color effects and add a little bit of a border to this one. Go to image borders, and we're going to use number 8. And I like that you can adjust the size on these, so because I don't want it to be a big, huge white border on it. And it also cuts into your image more. And adjust the spread. And you can go grungier with the edges or less so. And then we're going to say apply. And then I wanted to add just a little bit more color back in. And I'm going to use a gradient map to do that here in Photoshop. So what a gradient map does as opposed to a gradient overlays color like a wash over the image that you can then blend. But a gradient map will put the darker areas of the gradient to the dark areas of the image and the lighter areas of the gradient to the lighter areas of the image. And I'm going to click in here and choose the one I want. And it's going to be this one that I previously created. And then we can, again, adjust the opacity of it to whatever you like it to be. So you can see the darkest parts of the gradient map to the darker parts of your image, and conversely, the lighter areas map to the lighter areas. And then, of course, the midtones all map accordingly. So I like using gradient maps, and they work well over a black and white image. So a lot of times I'll convert an image to a black and white and then apply a gradient map, so that it works properly. And there you have it. Any questions? Quiet bunch today.
Yeah, it is a quiet group today.
Usually you guys are pretty talkative.
I hate
Yeah.
to be the only one talking, but I got a few issues with Nik. I'm getting
What's
a new
that?
computer,
Uh-huh.
and I've got 5, 6, and 7 that pops up every time I, select the Nik software open in.
Okay. Uh-huh.
How do you get rid of that?
When you install it on your new computer, just install the latest one. And when you install a new version, it used to always just
me
install
some
over
right.
it. So I'm surprised you have all 3 of them.
Yeah.
But
I never had that option, so I was looking for that option when I loaded it in, but they never give it to me. So.
I know when I installed 7, it gave me the option to either overwrite 6 or keep both. And because of the perspective effects not being in 7, I did keep both in this case. But you can also go into, are you on a PC or a Mac?
A Mac.
Okay, I'm not sure how you do it on a Mac, but like at a PC, if I go into my settings, I can go into the apps and just delete the other one. So like if I go to DxO.
Yeah, and I can say for the Apple, you just have to go into whatever collection you want, and they do have an uninstaller app in there.
Yeah, I figured somewhere. So you can see here I have both collection 6 and 7. If I wanted to uninstall it, I can just click it and then uninstall it.
Yeah.
So I would just uninstall the ones you don't want anymore.
Yeah. So for the Apple, there is an uninstall app right in the Nik Collection 6 folder.
There you go.
Because I kept 6 in there, and my biggest pain is that 6 and 7 both show up. And
yeah, when I first open it, you get both of these little panels down here. So I just shut down, the 6. But like I said, I wanted to keep 6 if I wanted to use the perspective effects.
Right.
At least for now. I haven't really gone back to it much. It's not something you do all the time, but I do like the way that works in the Nik product.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't get it to work in my Apple stuff, at least out of Lightroom. Maybe it needs to be done out of Photoshop. I'll have to try it there.
Probably because you're actually moving the layer.
Yeah.
By stretching it that way. So that probably would have to be in Photoshop.
I have a comment
sure.
and a question. I don't know if it's appropriate here to bring this up, but most of the stuff that you have done here in the Nik products can be done in basic Photoshop.
Yes.
It just takes longer and the learning curve. Yeah. Before people run out, and it's expensive. I used it for years and years, and I still have it on my computer, and I haven't used it in a really long time. So I stopped upgrading it and paying the money for it. But like you said, you can do quicker. One thing I did like that I saw was the ability to control the HDR in areas. Which
yes.
I use it HDR in Lightroom a lot, and I don't think you can control that kind of level of HDR for different areas of the photo.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say Lightroom is great for your basic editing, but Lightroom is limited when it comes to you can't do layers. So like I can't do textures in Lightroom. I've got to be in Photoshop for that. Some things just need to be on separate layers to work properly. And that's where a lot of that selection kind of stuff comes in. I don't know. I use Lightroom kind of, like I said, for basic editing. And these days I've actually been using Camera Raw more than more than I have Lightroom.
Lightroom has improved a lot. I mean, you can almost
Yeah.
put layers in Lightroom now with all the masks and stuff. But my question was, how does this product, have you used Luminar products and how does this compare?
Yes. I love Luminar. It does not do what Nik does. Luminar is not geared to all these creative effects. It's kind of like a more of a Photoshop replacement than it would be, as an addition kind of thing. I mean, I do a lot of my basic editing in there. I do like their like power line and dust removal. They've added a lot of new modules over the last couple of years, and I've just been so busy with other projects I haven't explored all of the new features that it has. But I do use Luminar a lot. I do like it for a lot of things. So sometimes I will open a file in a Photoshop and I'll just go into Luminar and do all my editing, especially if there's certain features I know I want to use in there. So
One
yeah,
thing I didn't like about the Nik filters or the DxO that caused me to stop using it somewhat was I started trying to keep my files small, and I didn't like the fact that it created a whole new one or more raster layers, which doubled the size of the images. And I was getting images that were a gigabyte or 2 gigabytes large. And when you do a whole bunch of those, it clutters up your hard drive. And I do almost everything now with adjustment layers in Photoshop,
mhm.
which makes smaller files.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, I have a large amount of memory, so I don't ever really pay attention to that. It's not an issue for me, but I know for some people it is. You could always flatten a file and reduce the size, that way once you've finished your edits, if you know it's the way you want it to be. Um, you don't have to save all of the layers.
Do you know if Photoshop used to have, I think it was a 2 gigabyte limit on the size of a file before you had to go to PSB files? Do you know if that's still in effect on Photoshop?
I don't think so because I know I have lots of big files and I'm sure they're
Well,
more than that. But
Lightroom does have a limit of 1 gigabyte file.
Okay.
So you would run into a problem there if you hit more than 1 gigabyte, then it doesn't show up in Lightroom. But Photoshop can handle any size file
Yeah.
it needs to. It's just Lightroom can't. It's only limited to one. So you'd have to either merge the image or reduce the size of the image somehow.
So Jeff, have they gotten rid of the PSB files? Do you know?
No, PSD is still there, and
It used to be
the
that those were
larger
over.
file size is, I forget what they call it, PS something or other.
I
But
think
I've
that
created stuff that's 2-3 gigabytes, and you can open it in Photoshop, but you can't. You don't see it in Lightroom. Lightroom won't take it actually.
yeah. I think the PSB stood for Photoshop Big.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the Photoshop layered format. I usually
Yeah.
save things as a TIFF file because it's a more universal format. Any program can open a TIFF file. Nowadays, most programs will open a PSD. Like if I wanted to take it into Luminar, I don't remember if they'll open a PSD file, but it will open a TIFF file. So I got in the habit years ago because PSD, like I used a lot of Topaz products before, with Studio and all the other things, and they could not read a PSD file in Topaz. Now they can, but back in the day they couldn't. So I got in the habit of a TIFF file that any program could read.
That's a good point, Hazel. I used to save a lot of TIFF files, and I know you can save the layers and stuff.
Yep.
But is there any disadvantage to, I've gotten into the habit of always saving Photoshop because I always use Photoshop. But is there any disadvantage to saving them as TIFF?
No, it's basically the same thing. It's just, the proprietariness of a PSD file is a Photoshop file, or a TIFF file. It's just a more universal format, but they
So
both save layers. So
it even saves adjustment layers?
oh yeah. That's why I use my TIFFs, because I want those layers if I want to go back to things.
That's a good point. I should probably shift saving as a TIFF, saving to TIFF just for the reason that you just named, because.
And I don't know if it makes a difference with size. I haven't really done a comparison, whether the two file sizes would be different or not.
Yeah,
But
I'm
you
gonna
could
sit
check
down and
that
play with
too.
that today and find out. And I
Yeah,
might take your advice and switch to saving as TIFF
yeah.
because Photoshop may not be around forever.
Well, you never know when. I mean, I don't think Photoshop's going anywhere because it was, the original editor.
Right.
But you never know. Or they
And there,
change
and
formats or something.
even if they did go away, I think there would always be translators for older files,
Yeah, probably.
hopefully.
Hopefully.
I hope so,
Um,
because I only save in PSD files. I don't do TIFFs myself, but
Yeah,
that's
like I
just
said,
me.
Yeah, and again, I started doing it because I was doing a lot of Topaz work, and they couldn't read the PSDs, so that's why
Right.
I started doing TIFFs, and I just
Yeah,
stick with that, you know.
yeah. And
And it used to
that's
be
when I
too
end up
in
converting.
if I would like look at my file folder, it's not that way now, but back then, if it was a PSD file, it would just show like the icon. It wouldn't show the actual picture. Where a TIFF file, I could see everything. So that was the other reason I liked TIFF files better.
Is there a
Oh,
reason?
okay.
Is there a reason? I use Topaz all the time too, but I use it as a plugin in Photoshop. Is there a reason for using it standalone that you find better?
Not really, but the thing was if I had opened a layered file and it was a PSD file, something I had previously done, and then tried to go into Topaz even as a plugin, it wouldn't open because it couldn't recognize the file format. So that was why I started using TIFF files, because if I had a layered PSD file, then I couldn't open the plugin. It just wouldn't recognize the file.
But if you're in Photoshop and you open Topaz, you have no problems with that. So
if I'm just talking about if I already had saved the file and it was a TIFF file, I had all my layers here, and then I wanted to do something with Topaz. In the past, with the earlier programs I had, if I had opened up a layered PSD file, then I could not open Topaz even as a plugin. Only if it was a layered TIFF file.
I've never run across that.
I said that was, with a lot of their earlier products and Studio One, I think. I'm not sure if Studio 2 had that restriction. It's been a while since I've checked out all that. And now things are a lot more compatible nowadays. But now they've stopped updating Studio and all the old programs, so it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, I miss
I
Studio.
still use some of I still use it on occasion. But yeah, Dave uses it a lot. He likes Studio One better than the two.
Yeah, I lost both of those, and I could never get them reloaded into my computer. So, yeah, I could get the program loaded, but I couldn't get any of the presets and such. So, yeah, it's not a very practical program when you can't get the presets loaded.
No. And that could, and that's unfortunately when they stop updating things just, there will come a time, I know that will happen for me too, when you get a version of, Windows that just isn't compatible with, the plugins. And that's why you do need to keep things updated. At least,
so
if not every version.
I just had to go to all sorts of different plugins to get what I wanted.
And there's nothing that replaces Studio completely. There's plugin, because I did a webinar on that, I don't know, a year or so ago, and people had asked me, well, what do you use if you can't use Topaz? And I searched for various plugins, and there are different ones that will, some you can do like the impression type things, or a watercolor effect, but there's nothing that can do it all in one place. It just doesn't exist. Which really stinks, because I liked Topaz, and I did a lot of webinars for them over the years.
Yeah, that was a neat one. One thing, I looked on Nik's site, they do have now 50% off, although for Nik Collection 7, it drops from $159 buying it new to $109.99, so $110.
Okay, for the
Um,
upgrade. And that's if you
yeah.
have one of the last two versions. If you have something older than 5, then you have to repurchase it. I know.
Right. Well,
They
the
do.
brand new purchase price right now for Nik 7, if you haven't bought it before, is $110.
That's good.
And
That's not
and
bad.
the upgrade is 75,
Okay.
which that doesn't seem like they're discounting the upgrade at all, if I remember right.
Yeah, they tend to not, because you're kind of already getting a discounted price. So I know
Yeah.
they like, even when I have, they don't do the coupon codes all the time, or companies have kind of done away with, giving their affiliates codes. They're usually at
Right.
limited, times, but they never applied to the upgrade, only to the full purchase.
Yeah.
Because you're already getting a discount to do the upgrade.
So now is a good time, and use. We'll make sure we put her affiliate code in there so she gets the credit.
I also
for it.
sent you a couple things just before I went online that you can send out
Okay.
to everybody. There's a sheet
Yep.
with all of my contact info plus all of my affiliate companies, so it does have my links directly on there. And then there's also a flyer about our conference coming up in February,
Okay.
which is our
Great.
on here, the Creative Photography Conference. And we have
Good,
one
'cause
other
I'm-
question. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm putting out Wacko's newsletter is
Okay.
coming out in about 3
Good.
weeks, so I'll put all that stuff in the newsletter
Thank
too,
you.
so
Appreciate
it gets
that.
out to all the people in
Yeah.
there. Yeah, you
We have
saw
a
the
question on, yep,
s-
on Smart Photo Editor, which I've talked about in the past. And can it be loaded on more than one computer? Yes, you could do it on 2, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's on 2.
Yeah.
And that's a really inexpensive program. It's a very cool little program. If anybody's interested in that, I've done some webinars on it on my own page. If you go to my website and click on the webinar page, about halfway down, I have a link to a list of all the webinars I've done of my own. And you can see the topics, and then they're all on my YouTube channel. So you can link to that from there.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's 2, but there's a chance it might just be 1. The basic program as a standalone is like $29.99. If you get the I think they call it like the studio version, so that you can use it as a plugin, it's like $49. So it's not bad. It's filter, it's by Anthropics, and there's like thousands of creative effects in here. You can also do basic editing, which I really don't tend to do here. I usually do that in either Photoshop or something else. But if you go into the effects gallery, you can see how some are really wild, but you narrow them down. This is where you can get some nice watercolor effects and other things. You can get kind of, the grungier looks if you want, different textures and things. And these are all created by users of the program. So you can actually create an effect and add it to the library. So the first time I use it, like today is the first time I've gone in here. When I close out of here, it's going to do a search for any new community effects that have been added. So it's constantly being updated with new stuff. And I like this for a lot of different, just some creative effects. Mike Motes uses this like exclusively. If any of you follow Mike, the macro photographer, he's actually going to be at our conference in February. But he uses that. He's not a Photoshop person at all. And he'll just do stuff in Smart Photo Editor. That's where I first found out about it, was through him years ago.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
yeah,
it's an interesting, neat program.
it is, and it's it's not very
about
expensive.
Yeah.
So it's one of those extra little tools in the toolbox kind of thing.
Yeah, it looks like it can be used on multiple computers, but it's a little trickier activating it on the second computer.
Okay. I don't think I've
They-
ever put it on my laptop, so.
Yeah, it seems that you have to go through a few more hoops to
Okay.
get it loaded onto a second computer, but yeah, you can do that.
Cool.
I
Alrighty.
noticed that was a trick with that company doesn't like to have you use it on two different
Yeah.
computers, it
Well, I
seems.
guess they figure it's cheap enough you can you can
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
But
yeah, so definitely check out my
Great.
blog. My website is at the bottom. It's just Meredith Images. I actually started my Black Friday specials this past Thursday, which was my birthday. So I said, well, we'll start them now till the end of the month. And I've got sales on my courses, all of my textures, my own webinars I sell the notes for, which gives you the images and textures and anything used. So you could follow along with the replays and can create them yourself if you wanted to. Those are all on sale. And then we have our conference coming up in February. And till the end of the month is the best price. You get the $39 for the extra early bird. And that will also give you 90 days instead of 60 days to watch the replays. And you get speaker notes and a goodie bag with some freebies and discounts. And we always have over $2,500 worth of door prizes. It's 13 hours of seminars over 2 days with 8 different speakers. Jeffrey has been one of our presenters in the past.
Yep.
We have always a great lineup. So all that information is also on the website. And then that flyer that Jeffrey has to send out to you guys. And I do tons of workshops and travel workshops. And we just did in October Route 66 in the Southwest. I've got lots of shorter workshops coming up in the spring. And yeah, I haven't even posted it yet, but we're going to be doing a Sedona workshop next September. And I've done a few out there. So that'll be it's like 3.5 days, I think. So that'll be coming out pretty soon. We have a timeshare out there and we just did that. And then for a few days while we're out there, I'll be doing a workshop. So,
Great.
there you have it.
Neat.
All right.
Neat.
Thank you, Signe. I glad you enjoyed it. And
Well, thank you, Hazel.
yeah, thanks for
Your
having me back.
programs are always good.
Thank
We're
you.
running out of programs, unfortunately, for you. You got to come up with some more new
Oh,
ones.
we'll have some new ones this year that you haven't tried yet. So you'll have to look at my
Yeah.
list again. I'll
Okay,
send
I'll
you the
take a
latest
look.
list. I have new one on layers and masking. And I did do one on Smart Photo Editor. I've got on the list now. And what else did I? Oh, one for gradients and gradient maps.
Oh,
So
okay.
there you go.
Yeah, that
So
could be a
I
good
have a
one.
few new ones. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good if somebody is not familiar with working with those. It kind of gives you a good, clearer idea of a gradient versus a gradient map and what to use when and how to use them. And yeah. So.
No, that sounds interesting. Well, I'll definitely be looking again
Alrighty.
because it's getting fun getting speakers for
I'm
this
sure.
group since it's so many of them.
Alrighty.
But no, great. Well,
So
thank you.
everybody. Good to be back and good to talk to you again, Jeffrey. And I hope to see you soon. If anybody thinks of any questions, feel free to contact me anytime. I appreciate it.
Yep. I'll make sure I get all that information out for you.
Alrighty. I know you will.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good day.
We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Does anybody have any other general questions? Problems? New ideas? Any good ideas for what they want to buy for Black Friday? Since
But anyways, I got a question for you, Jeff, directly. Perhaps I might bug you. I'm supposed to pick up my new mini Mac next week, and
okay.
And I'm going to start doing the transition. I've always had somebody do it for me, but I'm going to do it myself this time. And so I might have to hire you for an hour or two next week. I'll give you a call.
Sure, give me a call.
Just call you. Be the easiest way to contact you.
Yeah. Just give me a call and I can help you if you run into problems. But the nice part with the Macs is as long as you're transitioning from one Mac to another, well, even from Windows to another, the Mac steps you through it so simply. It really goes 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think I paid a couple $100 last time to have the outfit do it for me, but I decided
Yeah.
I'd try to do it myself this time. So
Yeah, they walk you through it really easily, and that new Mac Mini, I'm actually looking to upgrade to it because it is working so fast and is so small and quite a bit less expensive than what most of the Macs had been. So
yeah, well, all
Yep.
the influencers are in love with it. I can tell you that much. You go on
Yep.
YouTube and you see one after another, but I just mine's an Intel machine, and it's just I'm I'm losing patience with it, keeping up with some of the stuff I want to do. So I thought
yeah,
this would be
yeah,
the time to change it, and the price was right. So
yeah, yeah. The Intel machines are getting old for Macs, and I've got my laptop as an Intel Mac, and it can do Zoom, but that's about all it can really do at a decent pace anymore. But
Hmm.
the Intels are 4 years old. And that's when a computer gets old,
Yep.
especially with
That's
the
what-
new programs that are taking up a lot more.
maybe I have you. Maybe I'll have my wife talk to you too. So I've been trying to convince her why I want to do this. So I haven't sold it totally, but it's happening anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the Intel's still useful, but it
yeah.
more for internet searches and regular work. But when it comes to photography stuff, yeah, it's definitely gets
I
slow.
did find out something by accident. The Intel was really acting. My mouse wouldn't work. You know, it would be lagging behind, stuff like that. And when I went in and I just cleared my history on my internet usage, and bingo, all that trouble went away. So there must have been some garbage in there, something causing problems. So I
Yeah,
just cleared all my history. So I was surprised that it must have been some website I went on I didn't know about, because I'm pretty careful where I go. But
yeah. Huh.
so that was just a little tidbit there. But I was really screaming and hollering, and then all of a sudden well, maybe I'll just try to clear out the history. Maybe there's some junk in there, and that apparently did the trick. So
Yeah, sometimes that's all it takes. Okay. I'm having problems with my network. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm trying to look. Kenny Bowman's asking what are the special divisions for Wacko Spring Competition, but for some reason my network doesn't want network attached storage doesn't want to kick in, and I don't know because that's where I store that stuff. Let's see if I can get it to work again here, because I show everything. There it comes. Let's see, Wacko. Delegates meeting. Probably don't have it there. It's so hard to keep track of all this stuff. Well, we'll figure it out and we'll let you know. I can't for the life of me remember, and I can't find my reports. Is this it?
It's not on the
What would
website.
it be?
It's looking, Jeff. So
I know it's not on the website yet because I haven't updated the website. Wasn't on the top of my list. Let's see.
Maybe I
We're
should
looking
try.
at spring 2025 is Wisconsin landscapes, and the open projected, and that's for nature, and open projected is composites. So I'll have to get a better definition of composites of what we're actually doing with that, but it's more of, I believe it's the one that we let you do just about anything you want to create a composite image, and that would include textures and everything else. So those are the two. Tabletop is going to be fall of 2025. Is what I've got down on her November 2nd report. So I will double check. Fall of 2025 is animals and tabletop still life. And what I have for spring 2025 is Wisconsin landscapes and composites. But I will double check that to make sure, and I will get a better definition of what composites is. But I believe the composite category is one that we created to let you do just about anything you wanted to an image. So that takes care of those two things. Any other questions? Boy, this is a quiet group today.
We've all learned everything we ever need to know by coming here.
Yep. So, yeah, I don't know. A lot of good programs. If anybody has an idea for speakers, please let me know. I am working for next year's stuff. I was glad I could get Hazel to do this month because I don't think you wanted to listen to me talk about new stuff in Photoshop and Lightroom, which a lot of you have already heard from me as it is. And next month, December, we won't have a meeting. I will just be putting out my normal video and showing off different things, the way I process images and how you might be able to do things. Probably will include Nik Filters because I do use them a lot as well. And probably try to show all the new features in Photoshop and Lightroom, including a lot of the stuff that we can't use for competition, but is still something you can use for your personal stuff. So, and pardon my dog, he's undoubtedly barking at somebody walking by in front of the house. So, with that, if we don't have any others things, we'll call it quits for today. So thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it, and we'll see you. Well, have a good Thanksgiving and good Christmas, and we'll see you in January, not in person, but on Zoom. So,
Thank you, Jeff. It was a
Thank
good
you.
program. Thanks for setting it
thank
up.
you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
No problem.
Sort of
Have a
mind-boggling.